So hi, Sayan. How are you doing today?
Hi, Gaurav. Doing well. How about you?
Very well, very well. Thank you so much for coming out on a Friday afternoon to record this podcast. Really appreciate it.
No worries, no worries. It's Friday, and hence the time. So I'm not too busy on Fridays. Usually, I keep my schedule a little lighter because I'm already in my weekend zone post 3:30 p.m. starting Thursdays.
Oh, lovely. That's awesome to hear. So I think it's time of the year, Sayan, and it kind of reflects great to our topic that we want to discuss as well, which is strategy to execution and management control systems, right? And everybody likes to think about at this part of the year that what is my strategy for next year? How am I thinking about myself, my business, my team around me, and how will I execute onto that? And what kind of management control systems should I have, right? So before we dive into it, why don't you maybe take a minute, just tell the audience a little about yourself and why are you passionate about this topic that we are discussing today?
Okay, so about myself, my name, I'm sure you're all aware of it. I have about 10, 11, 11, 12 years of work experience. Half of it has been a little less than half of it has been in process excellence, business excellence, and process optimization, that field, Six Sigma, process management, and all of that. Post which I did my MBA, I specialized in competitive and corporate strategy over there. And the second half, post my MBA, it was a series of accidents. You could call it fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it, but that is what led me into this role, a role that toggles between strategy and execution, or rather doesn't even toggle, it actually fills the gap between strategy and execution. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what I do. I try and fill the gap between strategy and execution by setting up control systems, by ensuring that the strategy is, if there is a strategy or a tactic, let's not call a 1 year set of choices as strategy, because technically it isn't. A strategy is typically, it should have a duration of about 3 to 5 years, at least 5 years is optimal. 1 year, it's really a tactic, it's too short a time. Yeah, and I fill the gap via, just a moment, I fill the gap via planning, translation of the strategy, planning of work, and ensuring that work is actually happening as per the plan.
So, in all the experiences that you've had, Sayan, how many businesses you think really have a strategy? Are they working off annual operating goals, which are mostly tactics, or they definitely do have a strategy? And what is the importance of having a longer term strategy versus an annual operating plan or just a tactic, according to you?
So it depends with regards to the stage of the business, really. When I was working with the likes of Cognizant, Atos, Infosys, they all had strategies, right? It's a different thing that we did not get to see it because we were too junior. We did not have the understanding of it as to what it all led to. All those year one plan, year two plan, we did not have the foresight to understand what the broader objective was. Now that I look back, I realize having a strategy is in essence a series of choices, a complex set of choices. And how strategy is different from a tactic really is in terms of the amount of resources that you invest in strategy versus tactic, because and also the degree of irreversibility of the choices that you make. Right, tactic is typically short term. You do this, you think about something, you implement it, and you see whether or not. There is no right or wrong answer to this, because say for example a startup that has to pivot from time to time, you can't really expect them to have a 3 year vision or a 5 year vision, because their goal changes. It all depends on what the goal is, the big hairy audacious goal is for the founder for his company or her company, or what have you, how he or she wants to create an impact through the company, and how do they see the organization growing in front of them. So it all depends on that. A lot of people, a lot of these startups that I have come across, I'm sure there are plentiful other startups that have it all figured out, but Startup by definition is a company that not have a that is still figuring out its scalable business model, right? So they may have a long term goal, but then that's a little too stretched. They need to survive now, so you need to think about now first in those cases. Whereas, say for example, an Infosys or a Cognizant, they're already established. Their existing businesses are cash cows. They want to do so. They have two approaches really. One is with regards to their existing businesses and the processes therein, wherein they try to optimize as much as they can, which is doing things better. And the other side of the coin, or the other engine, as I call it usually, is strategic, wherein they want to do better things, like expand into a market, like, expand into a new business vertical. So that is strategic.
Yeah, I think beautifully said, son. Yeah, I think beautifully said. Just because you cannot have the same kind of size fit all, right? It's very different when you are a mature business versus a startup. So let's talk about, since this podcast is really for the startups and for the founders and for the teams who are working there. Let's talk about from that perspective, right? And you rightly said that strategy may be maybe a big long shot for them, because they need to kind of think about what's going to work today, what's going to be scalable, and kind of take it from there, right? So the strategy to execution, or even tactic to execution, what are the real time challenges that an organization fail or face for that? And what is the difference between failure and success that an organization or a founder or teams can apply in order for them to be successful at it?
Um, the first barrier is that there is a gap between tactic or strategy and execution. Ideally, not a lot of academia publish research on how execution is actually embedded in your strategic thinking. What I mean by that is, when we were actually studying the different strategy is not a subject, it's a discipline, right? It's a combination of different subjects that you need to know. So that is why you'll never see one person creating an entire strategy. And there's no good or bad strategy or good or bad tactic. If it works, it's a good strategy. If it does not work, it's not good. So it differs from context to context. I'll give you an example, a very quick example. Say, for example, Blitzkrieg. Hitler's Blitzkrieg was very popular. It gained him a lot of victories initially. But then, as soon as they hit Russia, Soviet Union as it was called back then, the USSR, they just did not account for General Frost, right? Blitzkrieg just did not work over there. So it all depends on context. And when we are actually designing strategy, there is a module strategy. While designing your strategy, you actually call out the series of steps. That is a process that is embedded in the creation of a strategy. And then with each step, you actually call out the critical points. Critical points are your risks that you can foresee in terms of, um, when in real time, when you would be executing those risks that could actually topple your strategy. So first and foremost, problem over here is that people are not aware of how to formulate strategies. So I think the gap starts from there. Um, and then, when there is strategy, there is not always good translation of the strategy. Now you've got mechanisms like, and these mechanisms have been there, like MBOs. OKRs are a form of MBOs. Then you've got balanced scorecard. And also, when these frameworks are used, they are not really used properly. Like, say, for example, a balanced scorecard, oftentimes teams use it, but they don't do strategy mapping, and therefore the gap. You don't know. So teams set siloed goals in terms of customer perspective, financial perspective, internal processes. But the ideal way of doing it is that you set up those top two goals, and then you create a map to identify the cause and effect. That is not done, and hence, so cause and effect thinking and understanding of how to create strategy, or the processes involved in creating a strategy, is not known to many. Of course, a lot of people know it, and that's why they've created successful strategies. It's all about understanding. And then, of course, The last part is, because strategy is strategy or tactic, these are all hypotheses, right? You have a certain hypothesis, you need to test it out at different instances as per the cadence, uh, as per a cadence that you're comfortable with, really. And that is where management systems come in. Now, mechanisms like balance scorecard, they don't really call out what cadence should be used. OKRs call those out. MBOs call those out. What cadence, at what cadence should you have your regular check-ins to identify whether or not you're moving towards your intended target, right? And then you change, or you keep at it, or do whatever. So these are certain things that, so there is no basis, there's very little basis in academia. So when people actually graduate or do whatever, they don't really realize until late.
Very well. And I think that's a very important made, right? Because if you don't have bases, if you don't have uh, things to go back to and learn from, it's maybe you're learning on the go.
On the go, and that's why you fail a lot more. You don't have strategy execution as a subject in any B school. That's a gap. You only have a few HBR reviews, HBR articles, and all of that. So
Sure. And do you think execution is the key, or building the right strategy, having the cause and effect, understanding from different metrics like the financial, internal operations, the culture? I mean, those are the keys, or testing that hypothesis with an execution framework is more important. What is your suggestion there?
it's all related, Gaurav. When you speak about matrices, how do you know as to what choices you would want to make? Say, for example, your strategy calls out for having a very strong personal connect with your customers. Now, how do you know whether or not you are existing in that zone? And you'll have to check for how many meetings you usually have with you. So metrics are the bedrock of everything. And then, of course, you have to plan. I mean, it's all hypotheses till it gets proved, right? So it has to follow a process. One cannot happen. There's no key. It's all, I would say, it's all built on top, on one on top of the other. And therefore you can't really take out one from the other and call out that this is key. No, it has to follow a sequence. It has to, like, say, for example, your annual operating plan cannot be done without your strategic planning at the beginning of the year. Because why would you have a different budget if you have called out that you need to work on certain specific projects for this year, which is not embedded in your BAU, and then you're creating a different budget, so you're not really implementing or deploying your resources accordingly. So it has to follow a sequence. You can't have one without the other. Sure, when times are good you may sail
Got it.
through, but when times are bad you need.
Absolutely. And what are the different execution framework that people can follow? I mean, do you have a few? I mean, from your experience, what works, what doesn't?
Execution framework in what sense? Like strategy execution framework. OKRs are good, simple to use, but understanding. I mean, it's not people need to think that these frameworks. I love balance scorecard too if it's used in the right way. If you are just using it to identify a series of so-called goals, then it won't work. It's all about how is it that you are arriving at those goals.
Hmm.
So it has to be anything that suits the organization. You can use a Hoshin country, if you will. You can use 4DX. So like I said, it's no one size fits all. It all depends on the people running the organization.
Absolutely. And management control systems, where do they come into play? Do they help in execution? Do they measure execution?
Absolutely. Management control systems. See, the testing of the hypotheses is a management control system. The testing of your QBRs are your management control system. Your MBRs, monthly business reviews, are your team catch-ups, weekly catch-ups. Those are management control systems. So you look at it. See, a business is a collection of processes, right? If you were to segregate a business into, um, so there are two sides to it. One is the effort, that means the process itself, and the outcome, or the output. Now, management control system you set on both sides. On the side of the output, you have your management control system, or your control system. Let's not call it MCSs. It's too long. To verify whether or not the output is per intention, as per intended word is, right? Say for example, you have your when you ship out, right before shipping out a piece of code, uh, developers test them. That's a control system, right? And on the process side, on the effort side, you ensure that your control systems are calling out known errors, so that you're not, if you already know that something isn't working, then you won't do that for a particular outcome.
No, very well. And you know how much of a common sense it may seem like, we will be surprised that a lot of businesses actually run without that, right? And I think if one can only identify that you need some kind of a strategy, it could be loose to begin with, but you can tighten that up as you go along, and then have a framework for execution that you may want to choose. And there are many out there, like Sayan, you said, you can choose what you think is the right fit for you, as an organization, depending on the size, the complexity, the maturity, and then have some sense of the control systems that you want.
I've never seen a so-called successful organization running without a strategy. I've never seen that. You uh, take any organization from history. They always had a B hack for them. They had their mission, they had their vision statements, and they had their long term plans. Okay, so now long term, the definition of long term may have changed now. I mean, how do you think TCS has been or is being run for so many years without any without being disrupted? And then you have a Kodak that got disrupted, right? Uh, you have an IBM. How old is IBM now? Almost 100 years, 100 years plus.
It's phenomenal, right? So yeah, so I think you're absolutely right.
You can be lucky once, you can't be lucky.
That's great. No, thank you, Sayan. I think this was very useful. So just want to kind of take away from there and get into a zone of culture, right? So do you think creating that culture where people are obsessed about strategy, execution, and these control systems, do you think it's a need for one to be successful today? Is that something which you would want every organization to think about it very, very carefully, or you think that you need to have some sort of success going for you, and these are the only ways to scale and not just to sustain right now?
Isn't this the only way to survive? I mean, I don't know. When you speak about, um, isn't this just common sense? I mean, okay, I'm burning cash, but I don't really know how much cash I'm supposed to or I'm allowed to burn. This is common sense. On a day to day basis, see, business practices have been derived mostly from human practices. You want to lead a healthy life, you get your health checks done from time to time. And then you sort of control your diet. You sure you can do without that. That's your choice. But you do that.
Sure. And what are the technologies available? And what are the technologies available that can enable people to do that, right? What are the different okay.
Lots actually. You've got technologies like now. Previously, we did not have as many strategy execution so-called frameworks or strategy mapping tools. Even if we had, I am not aware of, to be honest. But more than technology, technology is just an enabler. You need to understand what. So to your previous question, Gaurav, it's more a matter of common sense. um, than, I mean, whether or not a work is being done, whether or not a project is successful. You take up any, say for example, project management. You take up any project management framework, a PMBOK or a Prince 2. It clearly calls out that a project is considered to be successful if you've realized the benefits vis-a-vis the cost. So it's there for everybody to use. Now, if people don't use it, I don't know.
Right. No, I think very well. No, thank you so much. Just before we let you go, Sayan, we know that it's almost time. Let us do a quick round of, quick fire questions. Are you okay with that?
Is that? Yeah, sure, sure, sure. No
Okay.
worries.
So choose between one, strategy or execution.
Can't choose. Can't choose. One cannot live without the other.
Technology or framework? What is according to you more important?
Framework. Framework. Technology has to be based on the framework.
Right. What is the go-to metrics for assessing organization health according to you?
For matured companies, profit per unit cost, utilization ratios, and for companies that are just starting up, obviously run rate, if they are in the survival mode, run rate, um, customer acquisition cost vis-a-vis lifetime values. Then there are companies where you don't have lifetime values. Say, for example, a weddings.in. Oh shit, I'm taking the name of a company. Anyways, where people, so event based organizations, let's just say. So you look at repeat customers, you look at the number of customers.
Right. Any particular book or influencer you want the audience to have a look at in the subject of strategy, execution, or the control frameworks that we're talking
Jack Welch. Anything and everything to do with Jack Welch. Yeah, just don't read about how much he's achieved. Also read about how much he's not achieved or damaged. So he's a fantastic success story, I feel, and a failure story.
Very well. Very well. Thank you. Thank you, Sayan. Thanks for your time today. And we will be in touch. And if the audience wants to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you, Sayan?
LinkedIn. I'm available on LinkedIn. People can find my number on LinkedIn, my email ID on LinkedIn, everything. It's just my name. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, man. Cheers.